about 8 years ago, the hearing in my right ear went overnight, suddenly. So I was actually quite stunned. Anyway, the long and the short is I got hearing aids which keep me going. It's very late. I woke up about 4 o'clock and I heard this whoo, whoosh sort of noise and then nothing. So I rang a girlfriend. I couldn't hear her. I just left a message and said, please, if you hear this, come. Luckily she did and she came. But it is a shock. You don't know where to start. Anyway, she took me to the local hospital where they told me, well, it's old age, dear. You have to expect it. This was actually Malaga in Spain. And then I heard in London that it was the cochlea that had lost its little hairs, and that was that. I've never really known what this ear is. I think it's a nerve problem. Anyway, the long and the short is I now don't hear, except with these fantastically powerful nuclear station powered hearing aids. This is the third set of hearing aids I've had, and without them you and I wouldn't be talking. They are fantastic. They are fantastic. I'm at the moment thinking and inquiring into a cochlear implant. Mm-hmm. That might be an answer for me, but I've only just started and it's a very long process. So I have to see. It may suit me, it may not. I don't know. A new hearing aid, have you heard of this?
I have,
that
yes.
Has a wire connection as opposed to these tubes. Mm-hmm. These tubes get condensation in them and you've got to clear them all the time. And it is interesting. It's like blocked drains. You go off air. It's very frustrating. I don't know if they're any better. The house is fine. Once you leave the house, it's another world. There are all sorts of things. I can't go to concerts or cinema or musicals or large gatherings. Or if I find myself in large gatherings, it's not that comfortable. Unless you're with a group of people who really know you, or a group who have hearing loss as well, you do withdraw, however much people say don't. It's difficult not to, because you're not comfortable anymore. You can't cope with it. And you embarrass other people, because after the third time of asking, can you say that again, or give it to me a different way, everybody collapses and gives up. In some situations, I cannot communicate, and that is frustrating. It's a shame, because you can't have a wider conversation with people. And I suppose that then happens, you start to live, which in your own little world, you withdraw. It's not unpleasant, but you get used to it and you give up perhaps a bit more easily. Sometimes I think it would be nice if there's a really juicy conversation going on with lots of gossip. I miss all the pertinent bits. And it is frustrating, yes. One of the things is choosing where you go, really, if you can, which is somewhere with curtains, carpets, soft furnishings, because our new minimalistic design now is quite tough, really, for hearing people, because everything bounces back at you, always slightly distorted. And people talking to you one-to-one, if they can, looking at you, a little slower, I think, rather than anything else. I think men's voices are very often easier because they're at a lower level, they're deeper, and women's voices are softer. So if you can, yes, look at somebody as opposed to turning away and carrying on, because people do that a lot. They carry on, start a speech, wander off, and you've lost it. So obviously I can hear a bit, but I have to ask people to repeat, and they have to be patient. And usually they are, so that's good. Large, noisy areas are really hard to deal with. I avoid going to town when it's very busy and there are a lot of people there. My balance isn't good for me with the lack of hearing. If there are a lot of people behind, I can't tell who's behind me or what's happening, so I'm uncomfortable. So I tend to choose my days. The same as supermarkets. Maybe I go midweek rather than the weekend. I can't hear music, really, at all. Perhaps something classical. Anything very upbeat, I can hear the beat, but not necessarily anything else. If I went to a play, I would hear no words, so everything is visual. Well, of course, the best thing I've had, I have to tell you, is my dog, my hearing dog, because she wears a jacket and people can see straight away. And I have to say, she makes an enormous difference. People come up and help, and they're a little more patient, because it's not a law here in Guernsey yet for a dog to be allowed in. We have a letter explaining from the Hearing Dog Association and asking people, but everybody's been very good, and she is so well trained. She quietly sits down and that's it. Well, I now can know that when I have to get up for something, I will be up, because she will wake me with the alarm. That's actually important, instead of relying on myself. Or a bed vibrator, which doesn't work very well on an alarm clock. She's my mobile walking stick, because, as I mentioned before, my balance isn't good. So I can hold her, and she gives me some grounding. And of course, because she's there with her very smart jacket, people give me a bit of elbow room. Instead of being right, they walk in front of you, behind you, whatever, which when you're hearing you don't worry, but suddenly when you're not, you tend not to be quite so grounded. Yes, a companion too, because if you're, other people will say this, you live in a silent world if you haven't got your hearing aids in, and if you don't put a television on with subtitles, which gives you something. Of course, it gives you movement in the house and a companion. A big difference, actually. It would be nice if more people could have them. Biggest thing. Also, of course, she lets me know if somebody's at the door, because if I haven't got hearing aids in, I won't hear them. Mm-hmm. And I have had people drive away. She's safety, because I live on my own. Mm-hmm. She will bark at the odd thing. Not much, but it's enough that I feel it's a bit of protection. And smoke alarms. She will hear those. Travelling, for instance, I now don't feel as confident. My eyesight isn't as good as it used to be, so you're battling with two things, if you like. And hearing, I can't hear anyone behind me. I can't hear the announcements. Mm-hmm. And then you hold people up and you think, oh gosh, I held up a flight.
Did you?
I was so embarrassed, and then that actually is the only horror. I was really told off. In the end I said to her, look, I can't hear, I'm awfully sorry, but you know, you're really ticking me off like a little girl. But I learnt from that So in that way it worked. That's probably why I've told people, because I got such a telling off.
So they didn't know you were hard of hearing that time?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
No, and I was only just learning to deal with the travelling. Yes, yeah, interesting. So now I tell them when I check in and whatever. But of course now I have another thing, because I take her and then it's another procedure if I take her now, because you have to be escorted through and all the rest of it.
Can you take Ash everywhere with you when you travel?
She can come in the plane with me, which is extraordinary. They book off the seat next to me and she lies on the floor under my feet. I think if you had a smaller one, she could probably go on the seat. And she just has to be very quiet and good. And I've taken her once. I don't think she's flown before, but she just stayed quiet for an hour's flight when we went to England, and the same back. And she looked at me as the engines revved and we took off. But she stayed. No, so I can take her all the way through. And because I've got her with me, then they escort me, which makes it all much easier. And I don't hold flights up anymore, do I?
That's good. I had a hearing loss myself for about 20 years and I wore hearing aids. And I think that's what led me into the world of hearing therapy and working with people with hearing loss. So although I can't tell what it's like for anybody else, I know what it was like for me. I've been fortunate enough to have some surgery, so I can hear much better than I could before. One thing I've found is that people have a sort of perception that hearing loss is only found in pensioners, older people who are already struggling with everyday life. And that's really not the case at all, as I think some of your other films are showing. So I think it's fair to say that a lot of people with a hearing impairment don't want to tell people. They don't really want to say, they see it as a weakness or a failing, and because it's associated with ageing to some extent. And there's also that old thing about, if you can't hear me, are you deaf or are you stupid? There are lots of places that say they've got loop systems, but when you actually ask about it, you find that they haven't got them turned on. They've actually got no idea how they work. This has happened recently in a theatre over here. They've got about 3/4 of a system, but not not the last bit that actually makes it work. So yeah, there are lots of things like that that are just frustrating, and hearing impaired people just don't bother. Like Judy said, it's easier really to get the video and watch a film at home with subtitles. We could do with more subtitle performances over here, having had just the one, which was fantastic. But everything should be subtitled. It is mostly appropriate to touch somebody on their arm just to get their attention, just in a gentle way. Yes, just to get the conversation going, and yes, look straight at them, speak a bit more slowly, ask if they need help. What really doesn't help somebody with a hearing loss is talking really slowly and loudly like that. Doesn't work at all. You just need to speak naturally, slow down a bit, maybe a little bit more volume, but not too much really. It doesn't help. That doesn't help at all. And if somebody's lip reading you, they may think that you're angry. If your facial gestures start to get very intense, they might think you're angry with them. So actually just relax, speak a little bit more slowly and raise your voice slightly, and that probably will help quite a bit.